Hi everyone. I'm getting a lot of inquiry at the moment about purchasing commercial property. I think people are starting to look to commercial property as a way of diversifying their asset class and what they're investing in. So I wanted to do a quick video that explains at a very high level how lease stock assessment works. And the reason we like lease stock assessment is for those individuals who are looking to buy a commercial property as an investment. That is, they're not putting their own business in the property, they're renting it out to a third party. Lease stock applications can be really handy if you can get your head around them, because we can basically do an assessment and lend debt against that property without having to look at everything around the sponsor, that is the person borrowing to buy the property. We can literally rely on the rental income alone. So here's a very quick example, because these recordings only give me 5 minutes, of how a lease stock application works. Say you find a property, commercial property, with a purchase price of $1.8 million, and it's returning $100,000 of net rental income every year. Now, say the average kind of commercial investment rate at the moment is 6.5%. I've seen better, I've seen worse. What the banks do is they go, okay, what's your interest burden? The interest burden is simply the interest that you have to pay on the debt every year. Okay, so in this case, it's a $1.8 million purchase, and we're borrowing, in this example, $1.2 million to purchase the property. So at a 6.5% rate, the banks assess the interest commitment or the interest burden, and they normally attach a buffer, normally a 1% buffer to that, okay, to allow for interest rates to go up. So if you borrowed $1.2 million, your interest burden at a 7.5% assessment rate would be $90,000 per year. Now, what the banks are really looking for is this thing here called the interest coverage ratio. Now, different lenders have different metrics around this, but effectively what they really want to see is that the rent coming through from the property washes the face of the interest burden at a buffer. That's called an interest coverage ratio. And if it's above a 1, then it works. If it's below a 1, it doesn't. Now, different banks have different metrics around this. Some have a 1.1 times coverage ratio requirement, some have a 1.3, some have a 1.5. The higher their requirement is, the less you can borrow. So that's an important consideration. Obviously, the rate makes a big difference, and the assessment buffer as well. So my job is to find the banks that often give you the best rate, but also have the best metrics around interest coverage ratio requirements and the assessment buffer, in order to allow you to borrow as much as possible on a lease stock assessment basis. In this example, a $1.8 million property, returning $100K of net rent, so long as we find a bank that does a 1.1 times interest coverage ratio, you're able to borrow 67% of the purchase price of the property, and that's effectively secured by or assessed by the rent only. It doesn't matter what the sponsor is doing. Of course, the sponsor needs to come up with the difference between the purchase price of 1.8 and what they're borrowing, which is, $600,000 in this case. But so long as they can do that, they can get a loan to purchase a commercial property with tenancies in place and no need to demonstrate servicing on their own. Some caveats to this. The main one I'll point out is the term of the loan. Normally with lease stock applications, they're tied to the tenancy tenure. So if you have a 5-year tenancy or weighted average lease expiry between multiple tenants in one property, then you will get a 5-year loan term. That's reviewed normally annually, depending on the loan size, and renewed when you get an extension or the option is taken up on that lease. So, wanted to put this video out there. I think lease stocks are becoming more and more popular as a way of assisting investors to acquire good commercial property. And I wanted to demonstrate to you roughly how most lenders look at lease stock applications so that you have a good idea of it too. Thank you.